Well, then you know what? We shall start.
Amen, sister.
Yeah. And there was a couple things I wanted to ask. So I wrote some stuff down before I even do my little document share. If I were to ask you what self-love was, what do
Ooh,
you consider self-love to be?
that's a good question.
How about
I
you,
don't know.
Janae? Does anything pop into your mind with that question?
Being kind toward yourself and just loving yourself for all the qualities that you have, regardless of what others think about you. That's why I definitely need to work on.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I also wanted to ask, what is an example of showing yourself self-love?
Oh, good questions.
Yeah, if you had to give me an example of what that looked like for you, do you know how to answer that? No, right? How about you, Janae? And you don't have to force an answer.
I'm still thinking about that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, it's perfectly
It
fine.
requires way more than just self-care.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why I'm asking these because, and I know you guys have been to my events. I'm huge on self-awareness, like just
Yeah.
the awareness behind things. So, asking these questions, that's why I kind of want everybody to see like, oh, wait, I never, I want that to be kind of sparked into your minds.
Those are great questions. Wow.
And then I wanted to ask, just to have an idea, do you tend to give compliments out often?
I do.
In the reflection of when you give compliments out, is it an expression of gratitude, or can you see where maybe you have a little bit of insecurity about what you're complimenting in that person? Having that moment where you go, where is this compliment coming from? In that scenario, you might not recognize it, but if you kind of just keep that planted in your head moving forward, you might catch yourself giving a compliment based on, oh, I really wish I had that. That's what I want people to catch. Now, I wanted to talk about, so now we know these kind of things. We kind of triggered these questions, these little thoughts. I wanted to start chopping up and peeling away what self-love, because there's many layers to it, right? There's a lot of self-care, self-love, self-respect, right? There's a lot of selves when it comes to that. So I'm going to pull up my document. So what I wanted to do to start was just recognizing what these things are, because when it comes to our own self-love, it's going to look different for everybody. The recipe for everybody's self-love is based on the type of trauma they've been through. And like Janae said, some people will have elements where they were berated, they were insulted, they were put down, they were made fun of by things that they had no control over, physical attributes, or things they were born into, their culture, their race, their gender, right? I put, what is self-love? Self-respect, self-control. Self-respect comes from self-control. You will never respect yourself if you are a prisoner to people pleasing and external validation. I feel like when we say that, it's kind of like, yeah, I get it, yeah, that makes sense, right? Self-love, an appreciation of one's own worth or virtue. Self-love begins when we observe our actions and words with compassion, as if we were our own best friend. And then I put in parentheses, being kind to yourself, right? That's a very common term I think we're all familiar with. Self-respect, having pride and confidence in oneself, a feeling that one is behaving with honor and dignity. In parentheses, I put your character. And I know I've spoken about that in my events before. Self-control, the ability to control oneself, in particular, a person's emotions and desires, or the expression of them in one's behavior, especially in difficult situations. This is a perfect example of that emotional event that I that I host. It's that very thing, the self-control, learning. And again, that event it's different for everybody, and everybody has to kind of take what they can from that, because the recipe is so unique. It's so different for every single one of us. Where do we start? Which one comes first? Everyone will have their own unique recipe for this overall, but the awareness is the first step. Depending on the type of abuse you suffered from, you will also affect what this will look like for everyone. A person who is self-aware is the blank canvas to creating this creation for yourself. And then I put, this is the exciting part. Self-awareness is key because it puts you in the driver's seat of this journey. Your journey can include wrong turns, speed bumps, debris on the road, etc. But acknowledging it's a journey helps you not take life so personal by becoming an observer. And yeah, Laura, go right ahead.
I have a question, Michelle. So when you talk about self-awareness, what do you talk, like you're aware that you don't love yourself?
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, this is a great question. I'm glad
Yeah,
you
I'm
asked
not
that.
sure what that means.
Okay, so,
God bless you. I'm aware that I don't love myself, but I don't know how to do it.
yeah, it's like I'm self-aware about a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So I would say what I would term as self-awareness would be people who are willing to stop and put that pause button and go, okay, why am I doing this?
Oh, okay.
So self-awareness is knowing that there's a reason why you react to life.
Okay.
There's a pattern that you came into cycle with, so to say. So self-awareness is, I don't know if you were in the room yesterday, because I don't remember what time you had left, but there was one lady, because everybody was pretty much new. And I remember I told her, I'm like, that's a really great self-awareness that you have about your, because she was like, and even if I don't know, I would want someone to tell me, because I know that I've been through a traumatic life, and I know that I have bad traits from my family and from the dysfunction, so even though she doesn't always know what to do, she's still self-aware, and she'll still say, like she did in the group, please let me know if there's something that, I'm overstepping or I'm not doing right, because I'm still learning and I want to learn,
Yeah,
so
I get it. That makes sense. That makes perfect sense.
So that's why I say like the self-awareness is kind of like a foundation, and then the self-awareness behind this are kind of like things you would tack onto it, right? So you're already self-aware because you're already showing up to events, you're already trying to figure out yourself. So now this is an element you add to that.
Okay, good. Makes sense.
Like visually, it kind of hopefully makes sense. So like you continue to have self-awareness to a lot of things. The main thing is that you're paying attention to how things are affecting you.
Yeah.
Making you react a way, making you feel a certain way, all of those things. But bottom line is you're paying attention to yourself. You're honoring yourself in that recognition of what things are doing to you.
Yeah. I think you're the one who talked about that emotion, the wheel of emotions. I think it was. Yeah, you were showing me that. And that really helps because, like I said, sometimes I don't really know how I feel.
Yeah,
so that's
the worst part is when we're so stuck in a feeling and we can't understand either what it is or why we're feeling it. And I remember feeling that way in my marriage. I would just be in like a state of depression, and she would say like, what's wrong with you? And
I don't know.
And that would make it worse, is the fact that I had to answer, I don't know. So for the longest time, I came up with just random things because I felt like I had to give an answer. And then when I would start saying, I don't know, he would be like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Of course, he's an abusive piece of shit.
Right.
And that's where it was kind of used against me, because he was like, what the fuck? The fuck you mean you don't know what's wrong with you? How are you this sad and you don't know? And now that just overshadows originally what I felt, because now he's tacking on all this other crap. Yeah. And I feel like a total waste of life.
Yeah.
And that, again, I know we're like going on and on, but this is what that abuse, like healing from that abuse looks like, is that, that part that we had to live through with people who used things against us, that it's a common living right to not know these things. That's part of the process. We weren't born knowing everything. So the best we can do is just be self-aware. And that's the best we could give ourselves and everybody in our lives, honestly. And the people who can't allow us to become self-aware are the people that have red flags attached to them, because that is a form of control, right? So if you're not even given the opportunity to be self-aware and understand yourself, learn yourself again, it's because someone's trying to keep you, under their So thank you for asking that. And
well, thank you for answering that. That helps.
yeah, it gives me a good opportunity to explain it. So yeah, self-awareness is key because it puts you in the driver's seat. So self-awareness also, you would recognize the right and the wrong that you do. And that's why I say it puts you in the driver's seat, because you'll hit wrong turns, right? Like when we're going somewhere and we make a wrong turn, we want to be like, you moron, you idiot, right? But we're just like, it is what it is. I got to keep, now I'm on a new route, right? My GPS just tacked on 20 freaking minutes to my journey, but I can't turn around, so I just got to deal with it, right? So it's like in that kind of way. I'm not going to beat myself up about it all day because I missed a turn or something like that. It's that kind of concept, like being kind to yourself. You're in the driver's seat. You're going to make your wrong turns. You're going to hit your speed bumps where you have to slow down just to get past something. The debris on the road, I really wanted to put carcasses, but I was like, I don't want to put the word carcass. I'm like, so I'll put debris. But carcass was on the mind because we'll drive past things. I know I'll see like dead end when I'm like, oh, and then I turn around and I'm like, okay, but in those moments, it's like, it's still a thing, you still see it on the side of the road. You're not getting out, you're not stopping, you're just seeing it for what it is. And you're like, okay, that sucks. Yeah. And then becoming an observer. The reason why I wanted to specifically mention this, I remember thinking of things in that way and it helping me out so much. And it was around a time where I was like doing meditation hardcore. So I don't know if like my meditation mindset helped me out with that, but I really did feel like I had a new set of eyes. And I just kind of remember being in places and kind of looking around and saying like, wow, life is not personal, because I felt like I took life so personal all the friggin' time, because I was born in abuse. It was second nature for me. I would look for things to blame myself for, just to get it over with, so no one else would blame me for whatever. So it's like the awareness behind that, looking at things and going, oh, wow, okay. And then when you realize that everything's happening around you, little by little, you'll start recognizing like weights get lifted off of you because you never had them lifted off of you. So you'll start to feel lighter, and it's easier for you to not snap, not take things personal. So that's why I wanted to mention becoming an observer. If you've never looked at your life that way, maybe just those terms can help you kind of take a third party view of it. Where can someone begin their awareness to their starting point? And I wanted to use the word intuition. I had a woman in my group last night. Was it last night that I had the event? Yeah, I think it was last night. She made a comment about intuition that I did not agree with. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, because tomorrow I'm going to be talking about intuition. And if she was in the group, I was expecting her to like touch on this topic. But your intuition, it's the ability to understand something immediately without the need for conscious reasoning, AKA your gut feeling. For some, it could be a mental knowing. For others, it's a physical reaction like a knot in the stomach, a lump in the throat, sweaty hands, heart palpitations, etc. Intuition, and I got this from online, which is why I put the little asterisk there. Online, it said intuition is the ability to acquire knowledge without recourse to conscious reasoning. Different fields use the word intuition in different ways, including, but not limited to, direct access to unconscious knowledge, unconscious cognition, inner sensing, inner insight to unconscious pattern recognition, and the ability to understand something instinctively without any need for conscious reasoning. Blech, that was a tough, was that all one sentence? No, it was two sentences. I was like, gosh dang, is that one freaking sentence?
That was a mouthful, yeah.
So, that's why I'm like, let me just clarify, this was online. I feel like this is a paragraph you'd have to read like 4 or 5 times. I'm not even, I would do the same thing. Which is why, again, you could take these documents home
I love it.
Them, at your own pace. But yeah, there's a lot of deep kind of, I guess, understanding behind what that definition is. The respect and acknowledgement given to our physical reaction to things is important in recognizing these areas that need light and remolding. And then I use these words intentionally, because I don't want to say recognizing your traumas, recognizing your, right, terming these things like all these negative things. And I did this again last night. Someone was I don't remember what the heck they were talking about. And I was like, well, let's try to reword that, you know, and then
Yes, that
I brought it to
reframing.
yeah. And I'm like, cause that's kind of where it starts. You know, you don't
Yeah.
say heal. You don't say, you know, you could just say I'm remolding because, again, for me, it's a very kind word to myself. I'm not fixing something. I'm just remolding it, you know, like a
Mm.
mold or some, however, you know, you get to pick the dimensions and you get to pick the shape and you get to mold it your way. So that's why I wanted to bring up the terming that I used for that. And then I paid attention to how people, places, and life made me feel overall throughout my day. I was gauging this new awareness and keeping mental notes. And then I recommend a little notebook for this reason. I went to a dollar store and I bought like a 5-pack of those tiny little, you know, like the little pocket notebooks. And I would keep one in my car. I would keep one at work. I would keep one in my pocketbook. I would, you know, I'd have them kind of everywhere. And the reason why I'm just kind of making notes of this is because for me, when I had this new awareness, things would come into my mind at the most random time. I wouldn't even be thinking about it. And I'd go, wait a minute. And I'm like, oh, that's why I do this and that. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's interesting. And then I'd be like, but I can't think about that right now. I want to think about that later. And then later would come and I would forget what the heck that thought was. It's like the awareness was gone. Even though it existed in my mind, I thought about it, I could not freaking remember it. And I would be so mad at myself. And I'm like, I don't understand. Why can't I remember this epiphany that I had in my mind earlier? It was so powerful to me and I completely forgot it. That makes no sense. You know, so like here I am beating myself up about it. So what I would do is I would write down as much as I could. And the more I started writing, the more in like instinctively it became. So it was almost like my body expected for me to write these things down, right? Because now I'm creating this new pattern in my day that when I would get to write, sometimes I couldn't stop and I would just write and I would just write. And as I'm writing, putting it down in words, more things are coming to my mind. So it was almost like opening up this floodgate of information. So I highly recommend starting out with just a little notebook because, you know, the baby steps they're still steps. And if you didn't take babies, like if a baby never started taking baby steps, they're not going to learn how to walk, right? So like these little baby steps are so important, in my opinion, because they made such a tremendous difference for me. And then I remained kind to myself and became more of a reporter of sorts, again, because here I am in my little notebook and I'm just collecting data and information. Once I recognized the things that brought distress in any sense, whatever that would look like, I would stop and try picking it apart. This will look different for everybody. And then I put, if anybody would like to volunteer an example, we could try to pick it apart as practice. I don't know if anything would pop into anybody's mind right away, but kind of thinking of yourself as like a reporter and you're just taking down the data based on who you are at this present moment and how your reactions are. So if anybody's worked in healthcare, you know, or I mean, even when you go to a doctor as a patient, when you go to see a doctor for the first time, the questions that they ask you are for baselines, you know, and anything like that requires a baseline. So you're trying to see and you're trying to track whatever it is. So if you work in finance, if you work, whatever it is, when you walk into a place, you're going to say, all right, show me your account receivables, your account payables, what this is, what that is, because you need to come up with a state of what this is. The same thing applies to yourself. When you start becoming self-aware, you have to come up with a baseline. So now when you make changes, you can reflect back at that baseline, whether that's your blood pressure, your pulse, right? It's feeling where you are at this current state before you do anything. And of course, it's extremely self-fulfilling because when you start to document these things, you can reflect rather quickly and see changes as opposed to 6 months down the line and you're like, oh, I've come such a long way and you missed all those steps, right? So self-love is that time recognizing those little steps because we're honoring ourselves in that moment. Are you going to say something, Laura?
Yeah, you know, it's just interesting. I don't know if this exactly related, but it was funny because I was in a meeting a couple days ago and they were talking, the question was, what do you have to like learn to accept in your life now? Like, what's a new reality for you? And I was kind of surprised by what came out of my mouth. Like what I said was, and it shocked me, like you said, like kind of taking notes on that. And I was like, that's not being kind to myself. That's kind of really how I feel. That's really true. And he's like, yeah, but there's maybe like kind of what you were saying about reframing, like a better way to say that. And is that really true? And I was just kind of surprised. Like that was literally what came out of me. Like, wow,
And that's,
yeah,
you know what,
yeah,
this is a great reflection, because look how long you've been telling yourself that. And then once you verbalized it and told people, it was in your face that it's not true, you know?
yeah.
But
And it was shocking their reactions. Like, maybe you could just be kinder to yourself. And I was like, oh, I guess that isn't really kind. I guess I wouldn't say that to somebody else.
even in this moment where you're saying right now that you're recognizing it, now moving forward, that's a receipt, right? Remember how we spoke about receipts?
Yeah.
And starting to, you know, get that envelope ready for these receipts, that's a receipt right there.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, someone may have brought it to my attention, but I had the cognition and self-awareness to process it properly,
Yeah.
right? So even if someone brought it to light to you, there's still an element that you have to honor yourself in, because you understood it, you
Mhm.
know? So even if you didn't know it, right? So that's still the silver lining behind it, is the availability you have within yourself to say, yeah, you know what? I was wrong for thinking that. And I can't believe I did have that playing in the background of my mind.
Yeah. Where did
And
that
that's,
come from?
yeah, that's like, that's a wrong agenda. I know there's a better term that I hear all the time, and it's just not at the forefront of my mind right now, but it's like, releasing, like stories that no longer pertain to you. You know what
Yeah.
I'm referring to,
Yeah.
right? And I'm like,
Yeah.
what the
I
heck
do.
is that term that everybody says?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's that. It's releasing the agenda that no longer
Story.
resonates. It's not true, you know? So, yeah, I thank you. Thank you for sharing that, because that's a good example of that very thing. Um, in trauma, we walk away feeling more sympathy for others than ourselves. And most
Exactly.
likely we did this in the dynamic or relationship that was abusive, right? And just the awareness to that, and I put awareness to this, is great, because you can try shifting yourself to the other side of that. So recognizing that we cared too much about someone else at some point than ourselves is
Mm,
not to beat ourselves up, but it's for this very reason, to learn how to use that trait of ours for ourselves, right? So we're not going to use that trait to help someone else. We're going to flip it and try to learn how to use it to our advantage, our, you know, like using our weaknesses as strengths. So, an example would be recording yourself on video, telling a story of your abuse, like as if you're telling someone your story, and then watch it later from the same viewpoint and the awareness to why you are approaching it this way. And I'm going to explain more, because I know it's like a lot in one sentence. One of the things that I recognized about myself is that while I was in my abusive situation, I was in like the brunt of it all. But I tended to watch like TV shows or movies that were sad, that were depressing, because it was easier for me to feel alive by tapping into the sadness that I can feel for other people.
wow.
And it was because I never had that given to me. So I had such a hypervigilant response that I wanted to give that out so much, even if it was a TV show and I was just tapping into it. So when I recognized that, I was like, it was like this, like, again, this like this whole new set of eyes were given to me. And I was like, that's really crazy. Kind of like what you said, Laura. I would never say that to someone. So why the hell is that narrative? Narrative. That's the word in that phrase. Yeah. It's a narrative that no longer serves you. So it's like,
Yeah.
why is that narrative playing in my head? And it's the same example here. So what I decided to do is, and this is before I had my YouTube, this is before anything, I never felt comfortable even talking about my story. And I would record myself on camera on my phone. And I remember the story that time that I chose was a specific foster family that I had lived with. And because in my reflection, I felt like my time spent in this specific foster home cultivated a lot of trauma for me, in addition to what my mother even did. because of the age that I was. I was in kindergarten to second grade. So that time frame of my life, I know, is the age of where kids start to cultivate a lot of these things that I had no fucking control over as an adult. I was acting like a goddamn child. So I really wanted to put into words how I felt. Like I was just like, I'm just going to tell my story. And that's how I looked at it. And, you know, I started out kind of like, you know, I was in this age, you know, I was this age, this grade when I got there. And then I just started remembering stories that, you know, stuck in my mind that were like either sad or traumatizing, about my foster father and the dynamic of their marriage. Like now that I'm an adult and I kind of see things differently, I'm like, he was so fucking controlling over her. You know, she used to sneak into my room to give me stuff, like, and be like, don't say anything, okay? Because I, you know, so I would always feel like she was my savior. But in reflection as an adult, she was my savior because she would come to give me stuff, but then also show me the fear that she had for him. So it was like the recognition of, okay, sometimes I think I'll feel secure with people, but I still expect that there's an element of fear controlling them, right? Excuse me. So like this is where I was kind of in this place of my life, and I was kind of trying to figure out things. So I sat in front of the camera, I told my story, and then I waited. I couldn't do it right away. So I waited a couple days to kind of see if I can get myself back into like some norm that I was living. And then I watched the video. But when I watched the video, I understood why I did it. So I consciously tried putting myself into that third party and saying to myself, all right, I'm going to watch myself the same way I watch other people tell their stories, because I need to grieve, because I would hear stories that people would share that weren't as traumatizing. And I hate even saying that because it's not a competition. But, you know, the reason why I'm mentioning it is because I would feel so sad for them, and that I would go, holy shit, well, my situation was so much hurtful. Why don't I feel even more sad for myself? And it's because I lived in a different victim mentality, because I was living in a victim mentality, but it wasn't that type of feel sorry for me, let me tell everybody my story. And, you know, my victim mentality was more like putting on the shield and the armor, and being prepared to fight, always thinking one step ahead. How am I going to get out of a situation that didn't even freaking happen, right? So like that's kind of where my victim mentality was. It wasn't lying in the feel bad for me, pity me. So I had to do something like this because I would feel so bad for other people, but I couldn't even recognize the sadness of my own trauma. How the hell am I going to heal myself if I can't do that? So, you know, I recommend it. And again, it's used for people based on the type of trauma that they experience. Maybe sometimes people haven't been through such traumatic things where they don't have to take this type of approach. But for the people who have, knowing that this is out there and it's an idea to entertain for yourself, you have nothing to lose, right? Because you already live with whatever it is you're going to be talking about. If you've recorded your story, you might be bringing it to the surface. At the time, it might seem overwhelming, but knowing that you're putting in that work for yourself, because later on you're going to revisit that recording and you're going to approach yourself in a compassionate manner, which is why I said I took a couple days. I didn't do it right away. That's just how I did it. Oh, and then I put it allows you to relate to yourself from your compassionate side as opposed to your victim side. If you can start in the awareness to these things on a daily basis, it is an amazing start to feeling out your regular composition in this at the current moment. And then that's what I was referring to before when I was saying like the foundation of where you are right now. Start a journal of sorts. An example would be a gratitude journal, and we will review some examples. I will pull them up briefly. They have a lot of information. You know, like I say, this is something that I would encourage everybody to look through on their own. We'll briefly look through it, and then there's another link with like flashcards. So it's a lot of fun stuff for everybody to work on their own with. Anything that you kind of wanted to touch on or have a better explanation for?
I feel like it's great stuff. I feel like it's really what I need. That whole idea of recording your story is very powerful. I don't know that I'm ready for that yet, but just something to think
no, you just plant the seed, you know.
Yeah.
You might not be ready for it, but maybe your mind just needs it to sit there for a little bit until it feels comfortable, you know?
Yeah.
And again, that's self-love right there. Is saying, you know what, that might work good for me, but right now I don't think that it's a good time for me. So I'm going to follow my intuition on that. Even if you feel like right now you're not where you need to be, starting at the place where you are will probably allow the right people who need to know that you to come to you. You know, so a lot of times we'll think we're not at the level we need to be, but sometimes we don't even have to be at that level. Coming in as a newbie or coming in as, you know, someone who's learning it, that can inspire someone. And that would
Yeah.
be the reason why someone follows you. That would be the reason why, oh, you know what? She isn't perfect. She's acknowledging that she's a work in progress and I can relate to that. So I want to follow her. I want to hear her words. I want to hear how
Yeah.
she does it. So that, you know, whatever it was you were thinking, try to look at that as an empowerment, because you're acknowledging you're not perfect and people respect that a lot. I must say.
Even like the empathy thing, like I think you said it about like, that's your superpower. And
Yeah.
like that was so eye-opening to me. That was that reframing or whatever you called it. Like it was the switch for me. Instead of always feeling like, oh, I'm so empathetic and I always
So
care
why
too
am I always
much.
like this? I
And what
always
do I
get
worry
hurt.
about people? Yeah, and I always getting hurt. See that's my superpower. Like that I
Yeah.
really can love people and I do
Mhm.
care a lot.
You know what worked out really nice for me also, an analogy was a lighthouse. And, you know, someone said, listen, that lighthouse shines that light no matter what. And
Wow.
the boats come and go. That light isn't shining to bring anybody. It's shining because it's a lighthouse. And that's what a lighthouse does. That lighthouse is there for people in need. So look at
Wow.
yourself as a lighthouse and know that the light that you shine out, your empathy, your love, your compassion, the things that people take advantage of for you, I'm going to shine that light. And when a boat needs it, someone's in distress, they'll know where I am. And I'm still
That's
going to
so
be
good.
I'm still going to be a fucking lighthouse.
Yeah, that's so good because I feel like that's what these narcs try to do is try to steal our light. That's what I always say. It's like they steal our light.
You know what? When you think of a lighthouse, no one can steal a lighthouse's light, right? You
Correct.
can use the light, but you can never steal the light. So
Wow.
yeah, thinking of it's so easy to put ourselves as a lighthouse, right? And make
Wow.
these just black and white. Because when we think of it as ourselves, we fill with all these emotions, these life experiences. Oh, but this, oh, but that, oh, but that. Taking our light. And we tell ourselves, right? Like even when you said that, they take our light. No, they don't. You know,
Wow.
they might bask in it, but we have to remind ourselves that they're not taking shit.
They dim it. They try to dim it, but that's what I
The
feel like.
shadow, right? Those be a shadow. But if a lighthouse has so much effing light, you can't dim
Wow.
the light of a lighthouse. So
Because I feel like that's where I'm at. I'm trying to get that light back. Like, come on back, light.
yeah,
But
no,
it's
you
there.
have it. I mean, I told you from the first day I met you, you just gave off such a positive energy that I was like, oh wow, it's so nice to meet you, you know? So
Yeah.
you'll recognize that when you start tapping into that, you'll hear that more from people. Cause I used to hear it all the time. People
Me
like, you
too.
have such a great energy about you. And I'm like, shit, you should have met me a year ago because I was shit. You know, but even when I joke around about that, they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah,
Yes.
you too can be the light, you know? And then the
They
people
don't
who actually,
understand the hell we go through.
yeah,
The
and the
hell
people
we
who
go.
actually knew me were like, wow, Michelle changed so much, you know, because they knew me and they knew how mean I was. And I was always
Yes.
willing to argue with someone. I felt like defensive for everything because
Me
my
too.
family never made me feel like I was good for
Protected.
anything. They
Yep.
blamed me for breathing. So it's
Yep.
like I took on so much for no fucking reason that when I became an adult, it was like, oh, try me, try me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like because I have a lifetime of stuff pumped in my tank right now, and I'm about to blast it out at you. And it's like, well, why?
Yeah.
Why?
And I feel like my heart got so hard too, because it was like I had to always protect my heart. And it was like, you're not gonna fuck with me, period.
I wanted to say with what you mentioned about love, you're like, oh, I became so protective over love that I'm like, oh no, you're not taking my heart, you're not taking my love. Instead of thinking of it like that, because I understand what that analogy is, I look at it like you should be lucky you even had a taste of my love.
Wow.
You know,
Girl, you are flipping so many switches for me.
yeah,
Yes.
because my love is here whether you came here or not. So if you think you're taking something when you go, you're out of your
Wow.
mind. You know, it's
Wow.
the same analogy with the lighthouse. The love that you extend to someone is just tapping into your capacity of love, period. Right? So many people can bring out all this type of different love, like this, oh my gosh, I've never had a love like that. They make me feel so appreciated. They put me on a pedestal. They this, they that. No, they were just the type of love that showed that part of yourself because they saw it, but it still came from you.
Yeah.
You know, unless they're fucking liars and they're making stuff. You know, that's another freaking ball game. But you know, anything that you feel someone gave value to you when they loved you and then it was gone, remind yourself that you still have that within you for someone who actually deserves it. And then you say, okay, so next time I'm going to be a little bit more selective. You know, I understand what my value was. It doesn't matter if they didn't. My value existed before them and it's their loss.
And that's self-love. That's true self-love. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've walked away from so many people that if it was years ago, I would have fell for so many fucking traps.
Me
Honestly,
too.
I look and I reflect so much and I'm like, wow, that's so crazy that I didn't have enough self-respect that I wouldn't have done X, Y, and Z, you know? And I'm like, I'm proud of myself, you know, and I'm constantly filling up. Oh my gosh, I have to share a story with you guys.
Please do.
And this is someone that I've dated before and we kind of lost contact a little bit. So we went on a date. We hadn't seen each other in almost a year. He says to me, let me fill your cups. I want to fill your cups. And
that's your words.
He had no idea. I'm like, homie,
unless he's watching your videos.
No,
like that.
No, he can't because no, I don't think I talk about the cups in my videos so much. I think I talk about it more here because I really want to understand it. Okay. But I looked at him and I go, oh, and I said, you know what? I don't need anybody to fill my cups. I said, but I'll tell you what, I'll let you know when I have a cup. You could fill that cup, okay?
Wow.
Right. So it's like in that moment, I think men think women need to hear that I'm going to fill your cups. I want, what do you need? I want to give you, you know, what you need in life.
Yeah.
Let me fill your cups of love. Let me fill your cups of appreciation. And it was so nice to recognize that I'm like, I actually don't need you to fill those cups. I fill those cups, but
I'm so proud of you, girl. That's awesome.
And I was like, but it still doesn't mean that you can't give me that love because I can make a cup for you. But it's also telling him that I'm secure. I don't need that. So it's a big thing, especially if, I mean, I don't think he's a controlling person or anything like that. But if he was someone who wasn't a good character, by me doing that is letting him know, we ain't doing this, buddy.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not going to be
my savior. Yeah.
I'm not giving you access to any of those cups, homie.
Yeah.
I'm good. I got my own cups. So you're not tipping any over. Your cup just got created and I'm good, you know? But, you know, telling ourselves these things helps us process them when they're in our face and when they're in our life. But yeah, a year and a half ago, I was dying for someone to tell me that they would fill my cups. I fucking was. I was like walking around with my cups, like anybody. So it was the recognition that I was like, wow, I got something that my narrative told me I needed, right? And this is where I get to say, wow, I had someone tell me that, and I didn't.
Thanks, but no thanks. I'm good.
Yeah, I didn't need it. So it's like, awesome.
That's so empowering, girl. That's awesome.
So I get, but I take the time to do these still, you know, it's like, if I didn't have those moments where I'm like, oh, wow, this is what keeps me going, you know, is that awareness behind that. So, again, I always share my stories because I'm like, I'm not perfect and I can stand here and talk about everything. And a lot of times I'll even watch my videos and I'm like, God damn, I needed to hear that.
You preach it to yourself, honey. Yes,
yeah. It's me, but I needed to hear that. I need my pep talk. And even in my videos, I would say I can admit that I need that self-reassurance. And there was nothing wrong with that. It's just I had to recognize that I needed that. That was part of my recipe. I needed to give myself that self-acknowledgement. And
Yeah.
that's fine. It's better than looking for it from someone else.
Own power, like having our own power. Like I don't need you to tell me that I'm powerful. I know I'm powerful.
Hmm.
I don't need you to tell me that. Yeah, I'm getting there, girl. A
Yeah.
little time.
But thank you for acknowledging it, right? And I'll say it
There
in
you
those
go.
moments. I'm like, because that means that we're on the same page, and there's nothing better than that, and you make it like a little joke. But it's letting them know, like, oh, I'm glad that you see what I see.
Hmm.
I'm glad we're on the
I,
same page here.
I love how you reframe things. Like that really, really helps me.
So your knowledge behind that is indicative of what you've went through, correct?
True.
So that itself is a gift, because like me and you were talking, I said to
Yeah.
you, I've mastered so many things. I've come, and I don't want to say master, but I've come a really long way in a lot of things, and I still haven't figured that out. So the fact that someone is passionate to want to help people in that way is,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a God blessing, honestly.
Wow.
And I know you're religious, which is why I would never use the word God, because I try not to impose
know.
it. But you are like a God's angel in that aspect, whether it is that you had to live through that in order for it to touch you so deeply.
Yeah.
So God knows that you're going to go out there and you're going to find the people who need that guidance that you're able to give.
Yep.
Don't look at it like, what's wrong with me? I mean, because guess what? I could have done that. I was 20 years old when I met him. And when I met him, I was 36. I spent more of my life next to that man. Like, I remember there was one point where whatever my age was, if I divided it in half,
Yeah.
he took the majority of that time in my life. And I remember going, I'm going to
Yeah.
have to really go through like a detox, because
Yeah.
how could I have lived alongside someone for all that time? First of all, not knowing, right? But then I dove into my past, which I know you have, right? So you look into the family dynamics and say,
Yes.
okay, well, that's why I didn't see it, because I had to normalize this at some point, or the beginning of it, right? So it's like normalizing the trauma in the beginning of it allows you to pave that foundation on how the fuck you're just going to have to deal with the shit, and come up with these coping mechanisms that aren't ideal for you. So even though you don't like the things that happen, you still are okay dealing with it because you've had a coping mechanism.
What you were taught.
Yeah. So it's like, it sucks, but I'm dealing with it and I'm here. So it is what it is. But no, nobody should live that way. I mean, like, we can all look at it and go, no, that's fucking ridiculous. You're going to waste your whole life next to someone.
But like you said, I would say it to you, but I have a hard time saying it to myself. That's self-love.
Yeah, and it's because you also have voices of people that never existed in my life that have put that into your head. And I know what that means, because I mean, I've come a long way with that, like replaying things that people have said in my mind. But my ex was the number one contributor to that. And I would just out of nowhere just hear him say something in my mind, and I'm like, and it's something called a looping thought. And I'll actually go into more detail with you, because I learned about this in my schooling. And they say, with a looping thought, it starts with the remember, then that triggers something within us, right? Because I'm like, that motherfucker. The minute you start playing that, now your emotions get triggered. So now it's a thought, emotion, and then an action. So the thought is whatever's playing, it triggers an emotion. We have an emotion reaction, and then we react, whatever that looks like for us. So just knowing that there is a cycle when it comes to these repetitive thoughts is a good start. So when they pop in your head, you can say whatever would work for you. Again, this is like,
thanks.
Yeah, like, okay,
no thanks. Take that thought back. I don't want it.
Yeah, we're not doing that. We're going to hit a pause. Like, you might say the word pause.
Yeah, you were talking about that pause button last night. That was good. I got
a good word to use, because it's like a safe word. It doesn't mean you're damaged or you're broken, or, I'm going to pause that, and I'm going to pause it before my emotional thing. Or if you catch that, I'm going to pause it before I have a reaction, right? So it's like you have different areas in that where you can be aware to hit the pause button. And that's what worked for me. And it took a while, it's not like I'm going to say it's going to take a week. It takes a while to have these things pop in your head, and just being aware of it. But it works, because I don't have them as much as I used to. I mean, Like even
That's
now as we're talking about it, I'm like, I can't really recall anything that's been playing in my mind.
wow. That's
Yeah,
great.
that's
I'm
been
gonna pause it.
the thing. And trust me, he is so fucking verbally abusive any chance he gets. For I know, okay, I do remember the last time I was upset because, but then when I recognize, that's another thing I'm going to mention. When I recognize that I get upset, I give myself a time limit. That's another thing that worked out really good for me. So, for instance, the other day, I was at his house. I'm trying to think of what he made a comment. And it's so crazy because I'm like, I can't even remember what the hell it was. But he made a comment about me as I was leaving, dropping off the kids, and he made a comment about me being a mother. And I remember it really pissed me off because he said it in
Mhm.
front of my children. And as I was like walking down the steps for the house, my car was parked right out front. He made that comment, and he was kind of loud too because it was embarrassing. I
Yeah.
remember thinking, like, "You fucking asshole." Like,
Yeah.
it's embarrassing that you talk like that on the street as I'm walking into my car. And
Mhm.
I didn't look back at him. I just like ran to my car, got in my car. And as I was driving down the street, I started crying because I was
Yeah.
like, like I get it, but I started pep talk, like giving myself a pep talk. I'm like, I understand what he's saying isn't true, but
Right.
it still
It still
doesn't,
hurts.
yeah, it's still a hurtful thing. So I'm not going to just shove it under the rug and
Right.
act like my emotions don't count. I'm going to honor it, but I'm also not going to like say there's something wrong for me for feeling like I was disrespected and I was hurt. Like I'm still
Yeah.
gonna myself
That's
and
real. I mean, that's honest.
but then I'm gonna remind myself it's not true. So, but even that is like such a distorted thing to have to go through, right? So
It
like
is.
normal people don't have to deal with like the processing that we have to do when we have to deal with these things. So again, it's like a custom order. It's not going to look the same for everybody. But I went home and I remember in that moment, I was like, shit, I haven't allowed this to happen in a long time. Right. So
Mhm.
it's like here I'm like, oh, this is not good. So I was like, all right, so if this hasn't happened in a while, what else is going on in my life? Where else do I feel less than in different
Mm.
aspects of my life? And I was able to pick it apart. And there really was a common denominator that made me feel more triggered, I guess, to have that affect me. And I was like, all right, cool. I figured it out, and it's not him. Again, going back to his words don't have that hold on me. It
Mhm.
was his words that did it. It was
Mhm.
because I didn't recognize that this was really affecting me. I didn't really see it for what it was, and then it showed itself through him. So
Okay.
that's how I kind of got my power back in that because I
Okay.
was just acknowledging that his words were pointless. His words didn't really affect me. It really
Hmm.
wasn't it. I didn't give it power. I didn't say
Yeah.
it was the source. No, the source was something else. It wasn't
Mhm.
even you. So not even giving them that like that acknowledgement.
Power. Yeah.
Yeah. Like oh shit, you ain't shit. Like the fly
Exactly.
was there because the piece of shit was there.
Exactly.
Oh, shoe fly shoe.
Yeah. It doesn't matter. Get out
That
of here. Yeah.
analogy,
Yeah.
yeah. We need to handle the shit. Get the fuck out of here, you little fly.
Yeah. Yeah.